Mother Bear caught the dropped pacifier before it hit the floor. What happened next was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The morning mist hung thick around the small wooden cabin as Zara Williams stirred her baby's breakfast. Her 6-month-old daughter, Luna, sat in her high chair by the open window, babbling happily while clutching her favorite pink pacifier. The forest outside was unusually quiet, with only the distant sound of flowing water from the nearby stream. Zara's husband, Kai, had left early that morning to check their fishing nets downstream. The cabin felt peaceful, almost too peaceful. Something about the silence made Zara glance frequently toward the tree line, though she couldn't explain why. The air carried a strange scent, earthy and wild, different from the usual pine and morning dew. Luna squealed with delight, waving her tiny hands at something outside the window. Zara smiled, assuming her daughter was watching the birds that often visited their windowsill. The baby had always been fascinated by the wildlife around their remote home. Living 3 miles from the nearest neighbor meant they shared their space with creatures most city folks never encountered. As Zara turned to grab Luna's bowl from the counter, she heard an odd rustling sound outside. It was heavier than the usual small animals that scurried around their property. The sound stopped abruptly, followed by complete silence. Even the birds had gone quiet. Luna's babbling grew more excited, her little body bouncing in the high chair. The pacifier slipped from her grasp, tumbling toward the wooden floor below. Zara spun around, reaching for it, but she was too far away. The pink pacifier fell through the air, heading straight for the hard planks, but it never hit the floor. A massive, fur-covered paw shot through the open window with lightning speed, catching the pacifier mid-air. Zara's breath caught in her throat as she found herself staring into the dark, intelligent eyes of a mother bear. The enormous creature stood just outside the window, holding Luna's pacifier gently in her paw, as if it were made of the most delicate glass. Time seemed frozen. Zara couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't even think clearly. The bear was so close she could hear its steady breathing, could see the individual hairs on its snout. This wasn't supposed to happen. Bears didn't catch falling objects. Bears didn't reach through windows with such careful precision. Luna clapped her hands together, giggling as if nothing unusual had occurred. The sound broke the spell, and Zara felt her heart hammering against her ribs. The bear's ears twitched at the baby's laughter, but its eyes remained fixed on the tiny human in the high chair. What happened next defied everything Zara thought she knew about wild animals. The bear slowly, deliberately, placed the pacifier on the windowsill. Not dropped it, not threw it, but placed it with the same care a mother might use when setting down her sleeping child. The bear's massive head tilted slightly, studying Luna with an expression that looked almost concerned. Zara had never seen such focus in a wild animal's eyes. It was as if the bear was trying to understand something, trying to figure out why this small creature needed the strange pink object. A soft huffing sound came from below the window, and Zara realized with growing terror that there was more than one bear. A smaller head appeared beside the mother's, and Zara saw a cub, probably not much older than Luna in bear years. The young bear looked between its mother and the human baby with obvious curiosity. The mother bear made a low, rumbling sound, almost like a purr, and nudged the pacifier closer to Luna with her snout. The gesture was so gentle, so deliberate, that Zara felt her fear mixing with something else entirely: amazement, wonder, and a growing realization that this encounter was far from over. Luna reached toward the bears, her tiny fingers grasping at the air between them. The baby showed no fear, only joy at these new visitors. The mother bear's eyes moved from Luna to Zara, and in that moment, Zara felt something pass between them. A recognition, an understanding that both were mothers, both protective of their young. The cub made a soft whimpering sound and tried to climb up to the window ledge. Its mother immediately blocked the attempt with her paw, keeping the young bear safely on the ground. But the cub's interest in Luna was obvious, and Zara realized that this meeting might not be as coincidental as it seemed. Something was different about these bears, something that made them care about a human baby's dropped pacifier, something that made them stay when every instinct should have told them to flee from human contact. As Zara stared into the mother bear's eyes, she began to suspect that this morning would change everything she thought she knew about the boundary between the human and animal worlds. The mother bear's breathing became more audible, deep and rhythmic, as if she was trying to communicate something through the sound alone. Zara found herself unconsciously matching the rhythm, her own breathing slowing despite the fear coursing through her veins. Luna continued to babble, reaching toward the bears with both hands now, her pacifier forgotten on the windowsill. The cub below made another attempt to reach the window, this time succeeding in getting its front paws on the ledge. The mother bear didn't stop it this time, instead watching carefully as her young one pulled itself up to Luna's level. Zara's heart pounded as she watched the two babies face each other, separated only by the thin glass of the window screen. What happened next made Zara question her sanity. The bear cub pressed its nose against the screen, and Luna pressed her tiny palm against the same spot from the other side. The baby giggled, and the cub made a soft chittering sound that almost sounded like laughter. They were playing together, as naturally as if they were the same species. The mother bear watched this interaction with an intensity that unnerved Zara. There was something almost human in the way she observed the two young ones, her head tilting from side to side as if she was learning something important. When Luna pulled her hand away, the cub did the same, creating a mirror game that both seemed to enjoy immensely. Zara slowly reached for her phone on the kitchen counter, thinking she should call Kai, but the movement caught the mother bear's attention immediately. Those dark eyes fixed on her with such focus that Zara froze, her hand halfway to the device. The bear's gaze wasn't threatening, but it was clearly a warning. No sudden movements, no disruptions to whatever was happening between the two babies. Minutes passed in this strange standoff. The cub and Luna continued their game, pressing hands and noses to the screen, while the mother bear and Zara watched each other with growing understanding. The air itself seemed to thicken with unspoken communication, as if the forest was holding its breath to see what would happen next. Then Luna did something that changed everything. She picked up her pacifier from the windowsill and offered it to the bear cub through the screen. The gesture was so innocent, so pure, that Zara felt tears spring to her eyes. The cub sniffed at the pacifier, then looked back at Luna with what could only be described as gratitude. The mother bear made a deep, rumbling sound that vibrated through the cabin walls. It wasn't a growl or a warning, but something else entirely. Something that sounded almost like approval. She turned her massive head toward the forest, as if listening for something Zara couldn't hear. What came next made Zara's blood run cold. Answering calls echoed from the tree line. Not just one or two, but several distinct voices, all unmistakably bear. The mother bear's family wasn't alone. There were others, and they were coming. The mother bear looked back at Zara with what seemed like an apology in her eyes. She gently nudged her cub down from the window, but the young bear resisted, whimpering softly as it tried to stay close to Luna. The baby reached through the screen again. her tiny fingers brushing against the cub's fur for just a moment before her mother pulled her back. As the other bear calls grew closer, Zara realized she was about to witness something unprecedented. This wasn't just a chance encounter between a mother and her baby and some curious bears. This was something planned, something that had been building to this moment. The way the mother bear had caught the pacifier, the way she had positioned herself at the window, the way she had allowed her cub to interact with Luna, it all seemed too deliberate to be coincidence. The first of the other bears emerged from the forest, and Zara's heart nearly stopped. It was enormous, easily twice the size of the mother bear, with scars across its snout that spoke of many battles. But what shocked her most was the way it moved toward the cabin. Not with the casual lumber of a foraging bear, but with purpose, with intent. Behind the large male came two more bears, both adults, both moving with the same deliberate pace. They weren't hunting or foraging. They were coming to the cabin specifically, as if they had been summoned. The mother bear turned to greet them, and Zara heard a complex series of sounds pass between them, grunts and huffs and rumbles that sounded almost like conversation. Luna seemed to sense the change in atmosphere. Her babbling became more subdued, and she looked between the bears and her mother with wide, serious eyes. The pacifier in her hand suddenly seemed less important than the drama unfolding outside her window. Zara's mind raced as she tried to process what she was seeing. Bears didn't gather like this unless something was wrong. They didn't communicate in such complex ways unless they were planning something. And they certainly didn't show such interest in human babies unless there was a reason, a purpose that Zara couldn't begin to understand. The scarred male bear approached the window, and Zara instinctively stepped back, pulling Luna's high chair with her. But the bear didn't try to enter or threaten them. Instead, it did something that made Zara's heart skip a beat. It sat down in front of the window, just like a dog might sit while waiting for its owner to return. The other bears followed suit, arranging themselves in a semicircle around the cabin's front window. The mother bear and her cub took positions closest to Luna, while the others created what looked like a protective formation. They weren't threatening the humans inside. They were protecting them. But from what and why? The answer came in the form of a distant howl that made every bear's head turn toward the deeper forest. It was long and mournful, unlike any wolf call Zara had ever heard. The bears responded immediately, their relaxed postures becoming alert and defensive. Whatever was making that sound, the bears considered it a threat. The mother bear looked directly at Zara through the window, and in that moment, Zara understood something that defied all logic. The bears weren't just protecting Luna from some unknown danger. They were asking for Zara's help to protect their own young. The cub that had been playing with Luna wasn't the only baby bear in the group. There were others, hidden somewhere in the forest, and they were in trouble. As if reading her thoughts, the mother bear stood and walked to the edge of the clearing, looking back at Zara expectantly. The message was clear: follow me, help us. The bond between your baby and mine is just the beginning. Luna reached toward the bears again, this time with both arms extended, as if she understood that these creatures were no longer strangers but allies. The pacifier fell from her grasp, but this time Zara caught it herself. When she looked up, all 5 bears were watching her, waiting for her decision. The howl came again, closer this time, and Zara realized that whatever was happening in the forest, her family was now part of it. The bears had chosen them, included them in something that went far beyond a simple encounter between species. The question was whether Zara had the courage to accept their invitation into a world she had never imagined existed. Zara's hands trembled as she lifted Luna from the high chair. The baby felt heavier than usual, Or maybe it was just the weight of the decision pressing down on her shoulders. Through the window, she could see the mother bear pacing back and forth at the forest edge, her anxiety palpable. The other bears remained in their protective formation, but their heads kept turning toward the trees, ears constantly moving to catch sounds Zara couldn't hear. The scarred male bear suddenly stood up, his massive frame blocking most of the window. He looked directly at Zara and made a series of short, urgent grunts. The mother bear responded immediately, trotting back to the window and placing her paws on the sill. Her eyes locked with Zara's, and the desperation in them was unmistakable. Luna started crying. Not the usual fussy whimper of a hungry baby, but a deep, distressed wail that seemed to echo the howls from the forest. Zara had never heard her daughter make such a sound before. It was as if Luna could sense the urgency radiating from the bears, as if she understood that something terrible was about to happen. The mother bear's response to Luna's crying shocked Zara to her core. The massive creature began to whimper, a sound so heartbreakingly similar to Luna's cries that it sent chills down Zara's spine. The bear was mirroring the baby's distress, sharing in her pain as only another mother could understand. Zara found herself moving toward the door before she consciously decided to do so. Something deep inside her, some primal maternal instinct, was responding to the bear's plea for help. She grabbed her jacket from the hook by the door, wrapping Luna securely in her arms, and stepped outside for the first time since this strange encounter began. The morning air hit her face like a slap, carrying scents she had never noticed before. There was the usual pine and earth, but underneath lay something else, something wild and dangerous that made her skin crawl. The bear's tension made sense now. Whatever was coming through the forest carried a threat that even these powerful creatures feared. The mother bear approached slowly, stopping just a few feet away from Zara. Up close, she was even more magnificent and terrifying than she had appeared through the window. Her fur was thick and glossy, marked with small scars that told stories of survival in the wilderness. But it was her eyes that captured Zara's attention. Dark and intelligent, filled with an emotion that was unmistakably maternal love mixed with desperate fear. The bear extended her snout toward Luna, breathing in the baby's scent. Luna stopped crying immediately, reaching toward the bear with the same trust she showed to her own mother. When the bear's nose touched Luna's tiny hand, something passed between them, a connection that transcended species barriers. The other bears formed a loose circle around them, their eyes constantly scanning the forest. The scarred male moved to the front of the group, positioning himself between them and whatever danger lurked in the trees. His behavior reminded Zara of Kai when he thought someone might be threatening their family, protective and alert. Then Zara heard it, a sound that made her blood freeze in her veins. It wasn't the howling from before, but something worse. The sound of snapping branches and heavy footsteps moving through the underbrush, getting closer with each passing second. But these weren't the careful, deliberate movements of bears. This was something else, something that moved with predatory intent. The mother bear pressed closer to Zara, gently nudging her toward a path that led deeper into the forest. The message was clear. They needed to move, and they needed to move now. But the direction she was indicating led away from the cabin, away from safety, toward whatever unknown dangers waited in the wilderness. Zara hesitated, looking back at her home, at the life she knew and understood. Inside that cabin was her phone, her way to call for help, her connection to the civilized world. Out here was nothing but uncertainty and fear. But as she looked down at Luna, who was reaching toward the mother bear with complete trust, Zara realized that the choice had already been made. The baby began to babble again, But this time the sounds were different. They were the same soft grunts and huffs she had been making at the bears through the window, as if she was trying to speak their language. The mother bear responded with gentle rumbles, and incredibly, Luna seemed to understand, quieting down and snuggling closer to Zara's chest. The scarred male bear suddenly let out a warning growl that reverberated through the clearing. Whatever was approaching had reached the edge of their territory. The other bears immediately formed a tighter formation, preparing for whatever was about to emerge from the forest. What came out of the trees made Zara's heart stop completely. It wasn't an animal at all, but a man, tall and gaunt, wearing clothes that looked like they hadn't been washed in months. His hair was long and matted, his face covered with a beard that reached his chest. But it was his eyes that terrified her most, wild and unfocused, like someone who had been alone in the wilderness for far too long. The man saw the bears and smiled, an expression that held no warmth or sanity. He raised something in his hand, and Zara realized with horror that it was a dart gun, the kind used to tranquilize large animals. This wasn't some lost hiker or confused hermit. This was someone who had come here specifically for the bears. The mother bear positioned herself directly between the man and Zara, her lips pulling back to reveal massive teeth. The other bears spread out, creating a defensive line that protected both the humans and the path to wherever they needed to go. The man's smile widened as he took aim at the mother bear. "Perfect," he muttered, his voice carrying clearly across the clearing. "A whole family, and they brought me bonus prizes too." Zara realized with growing horror that this man had been hunting the bears, tracking them through the forest with the intent to capture them. The howls they had heard weren't from some other predator, they were from bears that had already been caught, crying out warnings to their family. The mother bear looked back at Zara one more time, her eyes conveying a message that needed no translation. "Run. Take your baby and follow the path. Get to safety while we hold him off." But Zara found herself rooted to the spot, unwilling to abandon these creatures who had shown such kindness to her daughter. The man raised his dart gun, taking careful aim at the mother bear's chest. His finger began to squeeze the trigger, and Zara knew that in seconds, the brave creature who had caught Luna's pacifier would be unconscious and helpless. That's when Luna did something that changed everything. The baby let out a cry, not of distress this time, but of anger. It was a sound Zara had never heard from her daughter before, fierce and protective, like a battle cry from someone far older and stronger than a 6-month-old baby. The sound had an immediate effect on every bear in the clearing. Their heads snapped toward Luna, and something passed between them. A communication that bypassed all normal understanding. The scarred male bear reared up on his hind legs, towering above the man with the dart gun, while the others began to move in a coordinated pattern that spoke of intelligence and planning. The man's confidence wavered for the first time, as he found himself surrounded by bears who were no longer acting like wild animals, but like soldiers following orders from their commanding officer. And somehow, impossibly, that commanding officer seemed to be the tiny baby in Zara's arms. Luna reached toward the bears, and they responded immediately, forming a protective wall around her and Zara that would have been impossible to coordinate without some form of complex communication. The man with the dart gun found himself facing not just individual animals defending their territory, but an organized unit protecting something they considered precious. "What the hell?" he whispered, his weapon shaking in his hands as he tried to choose a target among the bears who now moved with military precision. Zara looked down at her daughter, who was looking back at her with eyes that seemed far too knowing for a baby her age. Luna reached up and touched her mother's face. And in that moment, Zara felt something shift in her understanding of the world. Her daughter wasn't just an innocent baby caught up in this strange encounter. She was somehow central to it, the key to a connection between humans and animals that defied everything Zara thought she knew about nature. The mother bear took a step toward the man, and he fired his dart gun in panic. The tranquilizer dart flew through the air, but instead of hitting its target, it embedded itself in a tree trunk as the bear moved with impossible speed to avoid it. The man frantically tried to reload, but the bears were already moving, closing in on him with purpose that went far beyond simple territorial defense. They weren't just protecting their young anymore. They were protecting Luna, as if she were one of their own cubs, as if she were the most important thing in their world. And as Zara watched her daughter guide these massive creatures with nothing more than gestures and sounds, she began to understand that maybe, in ways she couldn't comprehend, Luna actually was. The man stumbled backward, his dart gun clattering to the ground as he tripped over a fallen log. His wild eyes darted between the bears and the baby in Zara's arms, trying to process what he was witnessing. "This isn't possible," he muttered, his voice cracking with disbelief. "Animals don't. They can't." But his words were cut off as more sounds emerged from the forest behind him. Not the howls they had heard before, but something far worse. The desperate cries of bear cubs in distress, coming from deeper in the woods where the man had apparently set up his operation. The mother bear's head whipped toward the sounds, and the pain in her eyes was so raw that Zara felt it like a physical blow to her chest. Luna began to cry again, but this time her tears seemed to fall in perfect synchronization with the distant cub cries. Each sob from the forest was echoed by her daughter, as if Luna could feel the pain of every captured baby bear as if it were her own. The connection was so profound, so impossible, that Zara found herself questioning everything she thought she knew about her child. The scarred male bear let out a roar that shook the leaves on the trees, a sound filled with such rage and grief that it made the man scramble further backward. But he didn't run. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out what looked like a radio, speaking rapidly into it in words Zara couldn't quite catch over the noise of the bears. "He's not alone," Zara whispered, the realization hitting her like ice water. "There are others." The mother bear seemed to understand her words, turning to look at Zara with eyes that held both gratitude for the warning and terror for what it meant. If this man had backup coming, if there were more people with tranquilizer guns and capture equipment, then the bears were walking into a trap by staying here to protect Luna. But Luna had other ideas. The baby reached toward the forest where the cub cries were coming from, her little face scrunched up with determination that looked almost comical on someone so young. She made a series of urgent sounds, not quite babbling anymore, but something more purposeful. The bears responded immediately, their heads turning toward the woods as if Luna had given them specific instructions. The mother bear approached Zara and gently nudged her toward the path that led deeper into the forest. The message was clear. They were going to rescue the trapped cubs, and Luna was somehow essential to that rescue. But it meant walking directly toward danger, toward whatever trap the man and his associates had set up. Zara's maternal instincts screamed at her to run in the opposite direction, to take Luna as far away from this madness as possible. But as she looked into her daughter's eyes, she saw something there that made her pause. Luna wasn't afraid. Despite everything happening around them, despite the danger and the impossible circumstances, her baby looked excited, like she was finally getting to do something she had been waiting her whole short life to accomplish. The sound of vehicles rumbling through the forest reached them, still distant but getting closer. The man's backup was coming. probably with more sophisticated equipment than just dart guns. The bears' window of opportunity to save their young was closing rapidly. The mother bear made a decision that surprised everyone. Instead of leading the group toward the trapped cubs, she turned back to the man who was still struggling to his feet. With movements so fast they were almost a blur, she knocked the radio from his hands and pinned him to the ground with one massive paw. But she didn't hurt him. She just held him there, looking into his eyes with an expression that seemed almost communicative. What happened next defied every law of nature Zara had ever learned. The man stopped struggling, his face going blank as if he was listening to something only he could hear. His wild eyes began to clear, the madness fading as something else took its place. Confusion, understanding, and finally, horror at what he had been doing. "Oh, God," he whispered, tears starting to flow down his dirty cheeks. "What have I done? The cubs. I can hear them crying. I can feel their pain." Luna clapped her hands together, making happy sounds as if she had just watched her favorite toy perform a particularly delightful trick. The mother bear released the man and stepped back, but he didn't try to run. Instead, he sat up slowly, looking at his hands as if seeing them for the first time. "She's in my head," he said, his voice full of wonder and terror. "The baby, she showed me what I was doing through their eyes. I felt what the mothers felt when I took their cubs." Zara stared at her daughter in shock. Luna had somehow connected the man's mind to the bear's emotional experience, forcing him to feel the pain he had been causing. It was impossible, supernatural, and yet Zara had just witnessed it happening. The distant vehicle sounds were getting closer, and the man suddenly looked up with panic in his newly clear eyes. "You have to hide," he said urgently. "My partners, they're not like me. They won't be affected by whatever she can do. They're too far gone, too consumed by greed. They'll take her too if they realize what she can do." The mother bear seemed to understand his words, immediately moving to position herself between the approaching sounds and Luna. But the man shook his head, pointing toward a barely visible trail that led away from both the main path and the direction of the vehicles. "There's another way to the cubs," he said. "A path they don't know about. But it's dangerous, goes through the old mine shafts. The tunnels are unstable, could collapse if you're not careful." The scarred male bear approached the man, and for a moment Zara thought he was going to attack. But instead, he simply looked into the man's eyes, as if testing the sincerity of his sudden change of heart. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him, because he stepped back and made a low rumbling sound that seemed to indicate acceptance. Luna reached toward the man, and he hesitantly extended his finger toward her tiny hand. When they touched, his entire body shuddered, and fresh tears flowed down his face. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry for what I did to your friends." The baby made soft cooing sounds, as if she was forgiving him, and the man's face crumpled with relief and gratitude. But their moment of connection was interrupted by the sound of doors slamming in the distance. The other hunters had arrived, and they would be following the man's trail toward this clearing. "Go," the man urged, struggling to his feet. "I'll try to lead them away, give you time to reach the cubs, but be careful in the mines. The spirits there, they don't like strangers." Zara wanted to ask what he meant about spirits, but there was no time. The mother bear was already moving toward the hidden trail, looking back expectantly at Zara and Luna. The other bears fell into formation around them, creating a protective escort that would shield them from view as they made their way toward the dangerous path. As they entered the forest, Zara could hear the man behind them, calling out to his former partners, telling them he had lost the trail, that the bears had scattered in different directions. His voice was getting fainter as he led them away from the real path, buying precious time for the rescue mission. The trail the man had indicated was barely visible, overgrown with brambles and fallen branches. It would have been impossible to find without his guidance, and Zara realized that his knowledge of these woods went far deeper than just hunting. He had been living out here for a long time, learning secrets that most people would never discover. As they walked, Luna continued to make soft sounds that seemed to calm the bears around them. The forest itself seemed to respond to her presence, with birds calling more softly, and even the wind moving more gently through the trees. It was as if nature recognized something special in this tiny human child, something that commanded respect from all living things. The path began to slope downward, leading them toward what looked like the entrance to an old mine. The wooden support beams were rotted and covered with moss, and the darkness beyond the entrance seemed to swallow all light. The bears hesitated at the threshold, their instincts warning them about the dangers that lay ahead, but Luna reached toward the mine entrance with both hands, babbling excitedly, as if she could see something the others couldn't. The mother bear looked at Zara with eyes that asked a question. "Do we trust your daughter's instincts even when they lead us into darkness?" Zara looked down at Luna, who was now glowing with an inner light that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Her daughter was changing before her eyes, becoming something more than human, something connected to forces that Zara couldn't begin to understand. The sound of the trapped cubs crying echoed from somewhere deep within the mine, and Luna's response was immediate and heartbreaking. She began to cry too, but her tears seemed to glow with the same light that surrounded her body. Where the glowing tears fell, the darkness of the mine entrance began to recede, creating a pathway of soft illumination that led into the depths. The bears stepped forward without hesitation now, following Luna's light into the underground passages where their young waited in terror. But as they descended into the mine, Zara began to hear something else mixed with the cub cries. Whispers in languages she didn't recognize, coming from the walls themselves, as if the mountain was trying to warn them about what they would find in its depths. The man had been right about spirits in the mines, but what he hadn't mentioned was that these spirits had been waiting for someone like Luna, someone who could bridge the gap between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. As they moved deeper into the mountain, Zara realized that rescuing the bear cubs might be only the beginning of a much larger and more dangerous adventure. The glow surrounding Luna grew brighter as they descended, casting dancing shadows on the rough stone walls. The whispers from the mountain grew more distinct, and Zara began to make out individual voices speaking in what sounded like dozens of different languages. Some were recent, the voices of miners who had died in cave-ins or accidents. Others seemed ancient, as if they had been echoing through these tunnels for centuries. The mother bear stayed close to Zara's side, her warm breath visible in the suddenly cold air of the mine. The temperature had dropped at least 20 degrees since they entered, and their footsteps echoed strangely, as if the sound was being stretched and distorted by unseen forces. Luna seemed completely unaffected by the cold, her supernatural glow keeping her warm and comfortable. As they rounded a bend in the tunnel, they came upon something that made Zara's heart sink. The passage split into 3 different directions, each leading deeper into the mountain. The cub cries were coming from all 3 tunnels, but they sounded different in each direction. Some were closer, others more distant, and the echoes made it impossible to determine which path would lead them to the most cubs. The scarred male bear stepped forward, sniffing at each tunnel entrance. But instead of picking up scent trails, his behavior suggested he was sensing something else entirely. His ears twitched constantly, as if he was listening to conversations Zara couldn't hear. The other bears spread out, each one positioning themselves at a different tunnel mouth, waiting for some kind of signal. Luna studied the 3 passages with an intensity that seemed impossible for a baby her age. Her glowing tears had stopped falling, but the light around her body pulsed in rhythm with the distant cub cries. Suddenly, she pointed to the middle tunnel and made a sound that was part baby babble, part something much older and more powerful. The moment Luna's finger indicated the middle passage, the whispers from the walls went silent. The sudden absence of sound was more disturbing than the voices had been, creating an oppressive quiet that seemed to press against their eardrums. Even the cub cries faded to barely audible whimpers, as if whatever presence haunted these minds was holding its breath. The mother bear hesitated, her instincts clearly warning her about the path Luna had chosen. But when she looked back at the baby, she saw something that made her change her mind. Luna's eyes were no longer the simple brown of a human infant. They glowed with the same soft light that surrounded her body, and in their depths the mother bear saw images of her missing cubs, alive and frightened but unharmed. Zara gasped as she caught a glimpse of what the mother bear was seeing reflected in Luna's eyes. 3 bear cubs huddled together in a metal cage, surrounded by mining equipment and abandoned tools. But that wasn't the most shocking part. Standing guard over the cubs was a figure that looked like a man, but wasn't entirely human anymore. His skin had a grayish pallor, and his eyes glowed with an unnatural light that matched Luna's. "That's impossible," Zara whispered, but even as she spoke, she knew she was witnessing something beyond normal understanding. Luna reached toward the middle tunnel again, and this time her gesture was accompanied by a sound that seemed to come from the mountain itself. The stone walls began to hum with a low, resonant tone that vibrated through their bones. Ancient symbols appeared on the tunnel walls, glowing with the same light as Luna's tears, marking a path that led deeper into the earth. The bears moved forward without hesitation now, following the glowing symbols as if they were reading a map written specifically for them. Zara had no choice but to follow, clutching Luna close to her chest as they walked through passages that seemed to pulse with life. As they traveled deeper, Zara began to understand that these mines were far older than she had initially thought. The stone walls showed evidence of hand-carved passages that predated any modern mining operation. Symbols and pictographs covered the walls, depicting scenes of humans and animals working together, communicating in ways that defied natural law. "This place," she murmured, running her free hand along the carved walls. "It's like a record of something that happened here before." Luna babbled in response, and incredibly the symbols on the walls began to glow brighter wherever she looked. The story they told became clearer with each step. Humans and animals had once lived in harmony here, sharing a connection that allowed them to understand each other completely. But something had gone wrong. Some catastrophe that had driven the humans underground and separated them from their animal companions forever. The mother bear stopped suddenly, her head tilting as if she was listening to something only she could hear. The other bears gathered around her, and Zara watched in amazement as they seemed to be having a complex conversation, using only subtle body language and soft sounds. Luna watched too, her glowing eyes following every gesture as if she understood exactly what they were discussing. Then the bears began to change. It started slowly, so gradually that Zara almost missed it. Their fur seemed to shimmer, and their eyes began to glow with the same soft light as Luna's. The transformation wasn't painful or frightening. Instead, it looked like they were remembering something they had forgotten long ago, reclaiming abilities that had been dormant for generations. The scarred male bear approached Zara and, to her complete shock, spoke. Not in growls or grunts, but in perfect, clear English that echoed strangely in the confined space of the tunnel. "The child awakens what was sleeping," he said, his voice deep and resonant but unmistakably intelligent. She brings back the old ways, the connection that was lost when the mountain swallowed our ancestors. Zara nearly dropped Luna in surprise. You can talk. You can actually talk. We could always speak, the mother bear added, her voice softer and melodic. But humans forgot how to listen. Your daughter remembers the old language, the one that connects all living things. Luna clapped her hands together, delighted by the talking bears, as if this was exactly what she had been expecting all along. The glow around her body pulsed brighter, and more symbols appeared on the tunnel walls, these ones moving and shifting like living text. The cubs, Zara said, trying to process everything she was hearing. Are they safe? Safe, but trapped, the mother bear replied. The guardian of this place protects them, but he cannot free them. Only one who carries the old blood can open the ancient locks. Old blood? Zara looked down at Luna, who was now reaching toward the deeper tunnels with both hands. What do you mean? The scarred male bear padded forward, his newly intelligent eyes studying Luna with something approaching reverence. She is descended from the first humans who learned to speak with animals. The bloodline was thought lost, but it lives on in her. That is why the spirits called to us, why we were drawn to protect her. Zara's mind reeled with the implications. Her daughter wasn't just special. She was the heir to some ancient connection between humans and animals that had been lost for generations. The bears hadn't found them by accident. They had been called, summoned by something in Luna's blood that recognized them as allies. The tunnel began to slope more steeply downward, and the air grew thick with an energy that made Zara's skin tingle. They were approaching something significant, something that had been waiting in the depths of the mountain for someone like Luna to awaken it. As they rounded another bend, they came upon a vast underground chamber carved from solid rock. Ancient columns supported a ceiling that disappeared into shadows, and the walls were covered with murals depicting the history of human-animal cooperation. But what drew Zara's attention immediately was the figure standing in the center of the chamber. It was the guardian the mother bear had mentioned, and seeing him up close was even more disturbing than the glimpse Luna had shown them earlier. He had once been human, but centuries in the mountain had changed him. His skin was pale as stone, and his eyes glowed with an inner fire that seemed both ancient and sad. He wore clothes that looked like they belonged to miners from 100 years ago, but they were perfectly preserved, as if time had stopped for him the moment he entered this place. Around him, scattered throughout the chamber, were dozens of metal cages containing not just bear cubs, but young animals of every description. Wolf pups, fox kits, even what looked like a baby mountain lion. All of them looked healthy but frightened, and all of them turned toward Luna the moment she entered the chamber. The guardian spoke, his voice echoing off the chamber walls like the sound of wind through stone. "I have been waiting," he said, his glowing eyes fixed on Luna. "Waiting for the one who could hear their cries, who could bridge the worlds that were torn apart so long ago." Luna reached toward him, making soft sounds that seemed to calm every animal in the chamber. The guardian stepped closer, and Zara could see tears of joy flowing down his pale cheeks. "She is the key," he whispered, "the one who will heal the ancient wound, who will restore the connection that was severed when pride and fear drove wedges between species." But even as he spoke, the sound of explosions echoed from somewhere far above them. The other hunters had found the mine entrance, and they were blasting their way through the tunnels, following the trail of glowing symbols that Luna had left behind. "They come with weapons that can harm even the awakened," the guardian said urgently. "We must free the young ones and escape before they reach this chamber." The mother bear padded to the nearest cage, but when she tried to open it, her paws passed right through the metal bars as if they were made of light. The guardian nodded grimly. The locks respond only to the old blood, he explained. She must touch each cage to free them. Zara looked down at Luna, who was now glowing so brightly that she was hard to look at directly. Her 6-month-old daughter was being asked to save dozens of young animals from an ancient prison, while armed hunters blasted their way toward them through unstable tunnels. The explosions were getting closer, and dust began to fall from the chamber ceiling. Time was running out, and Luna was their only hope of completing this impossible rescue before the mountain came down around them all. Zara rushed to the first cage, holding Luna out so her tiny hand could touch the metal bars. The moment Luna's fingers made contact, the cage dissolved like morning mist, leaving the bear cub inside free to run to its mother. The reunion was heartbreaking and beautiful, the mother bear nuzzling her cub with tears streaming down her furry cheeks. But as they moved to the next cage, something unexpected happened. The freed bear cub began to glow with the same light as Luna, its eyes taking on the same supernatural radiance. The transformation was spreading, passing from Luna to each animal she freed, creating a growing network of awakened creatures. "It's not just about freeing them," the guardian said, his ancient voice filled with wonder. "She's awakening their true nature, restoring abilities that have been dormant for centuries." The second cage contained 3 wolf pups, and when Luna touched the bars, they didn't just dissolve. The entire cage transformed into particles of light that swirled around the chamber before settling into the stone walls as new protective symbols. The wolf pups bounded free, immediately running to their pack leaders who had been waiting in the shadows of the chamber. Zara gasped as she realized there were far more animals in the chamber than she had initially seen. Adult wolves, bears, mountain lions, and creatures she couldn't even identify emerged from the darkness, all of them glowing with the same supernatural light. They had been here all along, waiting for Luna to arrive and complete some ancient ritual. "How many are there?" Zara asked, looking around at the growing congregation of awakened animals. "All of them," the guardian replied. "Every species that once walked in harmony with humans. They have been gathering here for generations, drawn by prophecies passed down through bloodlines both human and animal." Luna babbled excitedly as she freed cage after cage, each touch releasing not just the imprisoned animals, but also waves of energy that seemed to heal wounds in the very fabric of reality. The chamber walls showed scenes that changed as each cage was opened, depicting a future where humans and animals lived in perfect cooperation once again. But the explosions above were getting dangerously close, and now they could hear voices echoing down the tunnels. The hunters had found their trail and were following it with grim determination. Worse, the blasting had destabilized the mountain structure, and cracks were beginning to appear in the chamber ceiling. "There are too many cages," Zara said, looking at the dozens that still remained. "We'll never free them all before those men reach us." The scarred male bear, now radiating intelligence and supernatural awareness, padded over to Luna and looked deeply into her glowing eyes. What passed between them was more than communication. It was a sharing of knowledge that transcended language entirely. "She knows another way," he said, his voice filled with awe. "The child can free them all at once, but the cost—" "What cost?" Zara demanded, clutching Luna closer to her chest. The guardian stepped forward, his ancient face grave with concern. To release all the cages simultaneously, she would need to give a part of herself to each animal. It would awaken them completely, but it might— He paused, unable to finish the sentence. "Might what?" Zara's voice rose with panic. "Might change her forever," the mother bear said softly. "She would become something between human and animal, a bridge between worlds that could never be fully closed again." Zara looked down at Luna, who was reaching toward all the remaining cages with both hands, her baby face set with determination that belonged on someone much older. The glow around her daughter was pulsing in rhythm with the heartbeats of every caged animal, as if they were all connected by invisible threads of light. The sound of boots on stone echoed from the tunnel entrance, and flashlight beams began to pierce the chamber's supernatural illumination. The hunters had arrived, and their voices carried the cold efficiency of people who had done terrible things many times before. "Spread out," one of them called. "The thermal readings show multiple heat signatures in there. We've hit the jackpot." Luna heard the voices and her expression changed. The innocent joy of a baby discovering the world was replaced by something far more ancient and powerful. When she looked at Zara, her glowing eyes held the wisdom of countless generations, human and animal alike. "Mama," she said, speaking her first clear word at the most impossible moment. "Help them." Zara's heart broke and swelled with pride simultaneously. Her daughter's first word wasn't about her own needs, but about saving others. In that moment, Zara understood that Luna had been born for this purpose, that every event in their lives had led to this chamber, this choice, this moment of transformation. "Do it," Zara whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Save them all." Luna smiled, an expression of pure love and determination, and placed both hands on her mother's chest. The light that had been surrounding her flowed into Zara, and suddenly she could feel what Luna felt, understand what Luna understood. The connection between all living things wasn't just theoretical. It was real and tangible and beautiful beyond description. The baby raised her hands toward the remaining cages, and light exploded from her tiny fingers in streams that touched every prison simultaneously. The cages didn't just dissolve. They transformed into butterflies made of pure energy that swirled around the chamber before settling into the walls as permanent protection for this sacred space. But the transformation wasn't limited to the cages. Every animal in the chamber began to change, growing larger and more magnificent, their natural abilities enhanced beyond anything that had existed in the modern world. The bears became the size of small cars, their intelligence radiating like heat. The wolves grew sleek and powerful, their eyes holding depths of understanding that rivaled human consciousness. Luna herself began to change as well. Her baby features remained the same, but her aura expanded to fill the entire chamber. She was still Zara's daughter, but she was also something more. A living bridge between species, a conduit for understanding that could heal the ancient wounds between humans and the natural world. The hunters burst into the chamber just as the transformation reached its peak, their weapons ready and their faces set with greed. But when they saw what awaited them, several of them stumbled backward in shock. They weren't facing a collection of trapped animals and helpless humans. They were confronting an awakened army led by a baby who glowed like a star. "What the hell is this?" the lead hunter breathed, his dart gun shaking in his hands. Luna looked at him with eyes that held no anger, only sadness for the pain he had caused and determination to prevent him from causing more. She reached toward him, and Zara felt the same compulsion flowing through Luna that had affected the redeemed hunter above ground. But these men were different. Their hearts had been hardened by years of cruelty, their empathy burned away by greed and violence. Luna's power washed over them like water on stone, unable to find purchase in souls that had been deliberately closed to compassion. "She's the source," one of them said, raising his weapon toward Luna. "Whatever's making them act like this, it's coming from the kid. Take her out, and they'll go back to being normal animals." The awakened animals responded immediately to the threat. The giant bears positioned themselves between the hunters and Luna, while the enhanced wolves began to circle around behind them. But the chamber was large, and the hunters had high-powered weapons designed to bring down much larger targets. The Guardian stepped forward, his ancient power radiating like heat waves. "You will not harm the child," he said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "She is under the protection of all who dwell in this sacred place." "Sacred place?" The lead hunter laughed coldly. "This is just an abandoned mine full of valuable animals, and that baby is some kind of freak mutation that's making them act weird." He raised his weapon toward Luna, and Zara felt every protective instinct in her body surge to life. But before she could move, something incredible happened. The walls of the chamber began to move, not collapsing but reshaping themselves, creating barriers between the hunters and their intended targets. Luna had awakened more than just the animals. She had awakened the mountain itself, the ancient spirit that had been sleeping in the stone for countless centuries. The chamber walls showed new images now, depicting not the past but the present, showing the hunters' vehicles above ground surrounded by a forest that was no longer passive and defenseless. "The trees," one of the hunters said, speaking into his radio with growing panic. "The trees are moving. They've surrounded the trucks. We can't get out." Luna clapped her hands together, delighted by the chaos she had unleashed, and the sound echoed through the chamber like thunder. The awakening was spreading beyond the mountain, reaching into the forest above, calling to every living thing to remember its true nature and purpose. The hunters found themselves trapped in a chamber that was actively working against them, surrounded by animals that were far more intelligent and powerful than anything they had ever encountered. While above ground, their escape route was being cut off by a forest that had suddenly become their enemy. But they still had their weapons, and desperation was making them dangerous. As they realized the scope of what they were facing, their fear began to transform into the kind of reckless violence that came from knowing there was no way out. "If we can't capture them," the lead hunter said, his finger moving toward the trigger of a weapon that looked far more deadly than a simple dart gun, "then we'll kill them all and burn this place to the ground." Luna's expression changed again, the innocent joy fading as she recognized the true nature of the threat these men represented. The light around her began to pulse with a different rhythm, not the gentle warmth of before, but something more primal and protective. She was still a baby, still Zara's daughter, but she was also the guardian of every living thing in the chamber. The awakened animals sensed the change in Luna's energy and responded accordingly. Their own transformations accelerated, growing not just larger and more intelligent, but developing abilities that defied natural law. The bear's claws began to glow with the same light as Luna's tears. The wolf's eyes projected beams of energy that could blind and disorient. Even the smaller animals developed powers that turned them from prey into predators. The guardian raised his hands, and the chamber walls began to glow with symbols that were far older and more powerful than anything they had seen before. "You have awakened something that has slept for 1,000 years, he said to the hunters. "The child is not just freeing the animals. She is calling forth the old guardians, the spirits that protected this world before humans forgot their place in it." Shadows began to move in the deeper recesses of the chamber, and Zara realized that the animals and the guardian were not the only supernatural entities that Luna had awakened. There were others, things that had been waiting in the darkness for someone with the power to call them forth. The hunters' weapons might be powerful, but they were about to face forces that existed beyond the physical world, protectors that had been given form and purpose by a baby whose bloodline connected her to powers older than civilization itself. The shadow entities that emerged from the deeper recesses of the chamber were unlike anything Zara had ever imagined. They moved like liquid darkness given form, their eyes glowing with the same gentle light as Luna's, but their presence carried the weight of eons. These were the original guardians of the natural world, spirits that had watched over the balance between humans and animals since the dawn of time. The lead hunter raised his weapon toward Luna, his finger tightening on the trigger, but before he could fire, something extraordinary happened. The pink pacifier that had started this entire adventure, still clutched in Luna's tiny hand, began to glow brighter than the sun. The simple baby toy transformed into something magnificent, a crystal pendant that pulsed with the heartbeat of every living thing on Earth. "You don't understand what you're trying to destroy," Zara said, stepping forward with Luna in her arms. The fear that had been controlling her was gone, replaced by a fierce protective love that connected her to every mother in the chamber, human and animal alike. "She's not just my daughter, she's hope itself." Luna looked at the hunters with eyes that held infinite compassion, even for those who meant her harm. She raised the transformed pacifier toward them, and instead of attacking them with the overwhelming power at her disposal, she did something that broke every heart in the chamber. She offered them the same gift of understanding she had given to the redeemed hunter above ground. But this time, instead of forcing the connection, she simply made it available. The choice was theirs. One by one, the hunters began to lower their weapons. Not because they were compelled to, but because in Luna's light they could finally see themselves as they truly were. They saw the pain they had caused, the families they had torn apart, the balance they had disrupted. Most importantly, they saw that there was still time to choose differently. The lead hunter was the last to surrender, tears streaming down his face as he knelt before Luna and offered her his weapon. "Forgive me," he whispered. "I forgot what it meant to be human." Luna babbled softly and reached toward him, touching his forehead with her tiny finger. The moment their skin made contact, something beautiful happened. The hardness in his eyes melted away, replaced by the wonder of a child seeing the world for the first time. He was still himself, but he was also connected to something larger, something that would never let him forget the value of every living creature again. The guardian stepped forward, his ancient face filled with joy. "The healing has begun," he said. "Not through force or magic, but through choice. The most powerful force in any world." The awakened animals gathered around Luna, no longer as subjects following their queen, but as partners in a new kind of existence. The giant bears offered their strength, the enhanced wolves their loyalty, the soaring eagles their vision of the wider world. Together, they formed a community that bridged species in ways that hadn't existed for millennia. Zara looked around the chamber, now filled with light from dozens of awakened beings, and realized that they weren't just in an old mine anymore. This place had become something sacred, a nexus where the natural and supernatural worlds could meet in peace. The walls showed new images now, not of the past or present, but of possible futures where humans and animals worked together to heal a world that had been broken by misunderstanding and fear. "What happens now?" Zara asked, looking down at Luna, who was contentedly playing with her transformed pacifier, as if saving the world was just another fun game. "Now," the mother bear said, her voice warm with affection, "we go home. All of us. Together." The chamber began to change around them, the stone walls becoming transparent to reveal not the dark tunnels they had entered through, but a pathway of light that led back to the surface. It was Luna's gift to them all. A safe passage that would take them back to their lives, forever changed by what they had experienced. As they walked through the tunnel of light, Zara felt the weight of the normal world settling back around them. But it wasn't the same normal they had left behind. Luna's awakening had created ripples that would spread across the entire planet, touching every person and animal who was ready to remember the connections that had been lost. They emerged from the mine to find the forest transformed. The trees stood taller and greener, the streams ran clearer, and the air itself seemed alive with possibility. The redeemed hunter was waiting for them, along with Kai, who had returned from checking the fishing nets to find his world completely changed. "Zara!" Kai called, running toward them. "What happened? The entire forest is—" He stopped when he saw Luna glowing softly in her mother's arms, his face filling with the same wonder that had touched everyone else. Luna looked at her father and babbled happily, reaching toward him with the same love she had shown to the bears. When Kai took her in his arms, the glow spread to him as well, and Zara watched her husband's face transform as he understood what their daughter had become. "She's still our little girl," Zara said softly. "But she's also something more. She's the future," the mother bear added, padding up to stand beside them, the bridge between what was and what could be. The awakened animals began to disperse back into the forest, but they didn't disappear. Instead, they took up positions as guardians, protectors of a new kind of world where humans and animals could communicate and cooperate. The bears would watch over the families with children, the wolves would guide lost travelers to safety, and the eagles would carry messages between communities that were ready to embrace this new reality. The hunters, now transformed by their encounter with Luna's love, dedicated themselves to undoing the damage they had caused. They became protectors instead of predators, using their knowledge of the wilderness to create sanctuaries where awakened animals could live in safety. Years passed, and Luna grew from a baby into a young child who could speak with animals as easily as with humans. She never lost her connection to the natural world, but she also never lost her humanity. She became exactly what she had been born to be, a bridge between worlds, a healer of ancient wounds, a reminder that love was always stronger than fear. The pink pacifier, now permanently transformed into a crystal pendant, became a symbol of hope that Luna wore always. It reminded everyone who saw it that the most powerful magic in the world wasn't found in spells or potions, but in the simple act of a mother bear catching a baby's dropped pacifier, and the love that grew from that moment of unexpected kindness. Zara often sat by the window where it all began, watching Luna play with her forest friends in the yard. The mother bear still visited regularly, bringing her cubs to play with Luna as they all grew together. The scarred male bear had become the unofficial protector of their family, while the wolf pack often howled lullabies to help Luna sleep at night. The world had been changed by one baby's extraordinary gift, but more importantly, it had been healed by the choices that ordinary people made to embrace that change. The awakening hadn't ended in the mine, it had just begun. And every day, more hearts opened to the possibility of a world where love transcended the boundaries between species. Luna's first word had been mama, and her second had been help them. But as she grew, her favorite phrase became something that brought tears to Zara's eyes every time she heard it. We're all family. In the end, that simple truth was the most powerful magic of all. The mother bear had caught more than just a falling pacifier that morning. She had caught the beginning of a new world, one where every living creature was valued, protected, and loved. And it all started with an act of unexpected kindness from a wild mother who saw a human baby in need and chose to help. Sometimes the most extraordinary adventures begin with the smallest gestures of love.